Welcome back to Onshape, and today we're going to be looking at activity 1.3.2 in creating the trammel base. The first thing you'll need to do with your trammel base is get your measurements. Now I have much of the measurements here, but yours may be slightly different. We'll talk later about tolerances and how there can be some differences in different products, but for what we're seeing today, we're going to use these dimensions. Now this is going to be one of the most complex figures we've created, but all of the data that we need is here. We're just going to take our time and move our way around the object to make sure we've got all of our dimensions. Now going back over to Onshape, we're going to make sure that we have used a new part, going to Document, and we're going to call this one Trammel Base. This will go into activity 1.3.2, so you should create a folder for this part to make sure you stay organized. Now, one best practice we have whenever creating a 3D object is always to start with our simplest forms first. If you recall from our earlier lessons, we call those primitives. So we're going to start with our primitive. Going to our shape, we see that we have a simple square. So we'll go back into Onshape, and we're going to create our sketch, and we're going to do it on the front plane. I'm going to change my view to front, and I'm going to create a square. Now to keep things simple, I'm going to change my tool to center point rectangle to make sure it stays at the center of the plane. Now my square should be 4.25 by 4.25. Those are my overall dimensions. So I'll go to the dimensioning tool, and I'm going to make a figure that is 4.25 by 4.25. So we now have our primitive, our simplest shape. Going back, is there anything else we would need on this square? Now we see there are other shapes here, but before we start with those, we have to make sure we extrude at the correct distance. So I'll go back to Onshape. I'm going to confirm the sketch and go to my isometric view. From here I'll extrude. I'll make sure I extrude the correct amount, which is 0.48. I'll change the depth to 0.48 and select the face. And now I'll confirm. So we have our primitive. Going back, I see there are several dimensions, each of which I'll have to add something for. In order to do this, I'll need to create a sketch on the front of the face. I'll go to the Sketch tool, select the face of the object, and I'm going to change to my front side view. I see that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 holes. I also have a rectangle or square and a rectangle. Now I'm going to start by creating the square and the rectangle and adding in these individual points. I won't get them exact at first. I'm going to go back in and dimension them later. So first, I'll add in the square. Remember, I'm doing it from a center, but I want to change this to a corner rectangle for the next. I want to let it snap to this corner, but I see that it needs to be a little lower, so I just need to snap to the side as I draw it out. I need points. Each one of these holes represents a point on the form. Now in the past, we've simply done a circle and extruded the circle backwards. But for a hole, you may have different characteristics. So for this, we'll start with points and we'll make them actual holes through the object. So let's create a point. If I come up to my toolbar, I see I have a line, a square, a circle, so forth and so on until I get to a point. I'm going to add these points to the figure at approximately the right position. Again, I'm not adding dimensions yet, so I just want to get them close. Going back, now I have to put in the actual dimensions and where the figures go. I'll start by making sure the square is the correct size and in the correct position. So I'll select the dimension tool, and I see that the square should be 0.46 away from the corner. So I'm going to grab a side and make sure this is 0.406. But it also needs to be the same distance from here to here. So one thing I'll need to do is probably move my square first so that it moves up. Now I'll use the dimension tool to grab this distance and make it 0.406 as well. Now I know the square is in the correct position, but it's not the correct size. Here I see the square should be 1.25. So since it's a square, I know each side will be 1.25 and 1.25. Next, I'm going to go to my other solid figure, which is the rectangle here. I see that it is 0.5 down or 0.5 across here in the center. So looking at these lines, I can follow that. And I want to make sure from here to here is 0.5. I also see that the bottom line extends over to the 3.25. So from the bottom to the bottom side of this rectangle should be 3.25 inches. I'll change this to 3.25. What I do not see is a distance for this side. You'll have to measure this on your exact figure, but we're going to use it to line up with this line, which is 2.75 away. This will give us the approximate length. Again, you'll have to measure this on the actual Dremel base. Now that I have these two shapes complete, I need to make sure each of the points is in the correct position. First, I'll look at this point. I see it is 3.875 from the bottom. So I'll dimension this point from the bottom at 3.875. I also see that it should be 1.25 from the side. Well, I'm going to escape my dimension for a moment and make sure this is dragged over. If I don't, it could dimension in the wrong direction. So I'll drag down here and change it to 1.25. I notice something seems wrong. I should check my dimensions. It says from this line to this line is 1.25. I've looked at the wrong dimension. To change that, I can double click on the dimension and change it to 0.5. Or in this instance, it should be 0.406. I'm going to go down to this dot. Here I see that it should be 2.75 from the edge. Or from the bottom, I'll click and change this to 2.75. Now, I could go through and redimension all three of these, but I know the dimensions here are correct. But I know a few other things. This is horizontal to the original point. This point is vertically aligned to the original point. And this point is vertically aligned to this one and horizontally aligned to this one. I have tools to make sure these all align correctly, so as long as this one is correctly aligned, then I can attach these to it. I use what are called constraints. This constraint is horizontal. When I put my mouse over the constraint, it'll tell me what it does. I'll select the constraint, the dimension point, and the point that has to be horizontal to it. I'm now going to select the vertical constraint. And I'm going to vertically constrain these 2 points. I will also horizontally constrain these 2 points. And finally, a vertical constraint between these two. Notice that they snap into the correct positions, because in order to fit all of these qualifications, they have to be moved to a very specific place. So now that we know these should be in the correct positions, let's move over to these four, and we're going to do something similar. Let's start with this point. We see it's 3.875 from the left. Going to my dimension tool, I'll select the left side and this point. We're going to make this 3.875. How far is it from the bottom? I look here, I see that it's 0.375 from the base. I'll select and make this 0.375. This one is now in the correct position. I will vertically align it with this point and vertically align these points. I will also horizontally align these 2 points and horizontally align this point. So now, in order to meet the alignment requirements, they have to share a certain distance. But to make sure, I'm going to dimension this point. I see that this point should be 1.5 from the base. I'll go to the dimension tool, dimension the point and the base, and it should be 1.5. I see that it was slightly off. Let's double check our points over here. and make sure that we are in the correct position. How far should this point be from the left? If I go here, I see that it seems this point is aligned here with the 1.25. But the 1.25 may not exactly align. It may align with this line. Looking at our form, it looks to be correct. Now I have this point. We know that this point should be 2.875 high. So we'll select the point, select the base, and make sure that it is 2.75. Seems we typed in the wrong number. I can double click this and change this to a 2. That looks like the correct position. Looking here, I see there's no way to determine the distance from either side. That dimension is left off. We'll leave the dimension here since it seems to be in the correct place, but on the trammel base, you should find the exact position. I've now dimensioned and found the positions of all of my points. I'm going to confirm the sketch and rotate this back to an isometric view. I look here and I see this is 0.48 thick. Well, I need to do my extrusions. I'll select extrude, select the square and the rectangle. Notice these are still moving out. I want to change these to a remove, but they shouldn't pass all the way through. For the depth, I'm going to do up to next. Let's try up to face. For the next part, we need to determine the distance that needs to be extruded backwards. So instead of doing a blind, we'll do a up to next. So as I rotate this and confirm, it broke. Now I need to do my extrusions. I'll choose the extrude tool and select each of the faces that I want to extrude. We'll use the remove tool. The next thing I need to do is work on my extrusions. I'll go to the extrude tool, select each face, and I want to change this to 0.46. It should not pass all the way through. But we actually need to do halfway. The next thing I need to do is my extrusions. I'll extrude, select both faces, and I want to do this at half the depth. If you recall, the depth was 0.48. Half of that will be 0.24. So this will take us half the depth in, and I need to do this as a subtractive extrusion. And I'll confirm the sketch. If you'll notice, all of the holes for our sketch are now gone. What I'll do is I'll come over to the features window, and I'll turn the visibility on for the sketch. This is important as I add holes to the sketch. Going back to my figure, I see I have dimensions for all the holes. On your actual trammel base, these numbers could be different. You need to measure them to get the accurate measurements for each of these holes. These are giving me a diameter for the hole. I know on the back, these will pass through, but the holes on the back will be a different size. We'll look at those in a moment. For here, we'll start with each of these holes. We see that we have a 0.23 hole in the top right. I'll select the hole tool by coming up to the top and selecting hole. Then I'll select our point. I see that the diameter should be 0.23. So instead of 0.2, we'll do 0.23. We also want to make sure this does not pass through. So if I turn around and look at the back, I'll see that it does not. And I'll click confirm. I should have a partial hole that doesn't pass all the way through. But I see that this is not the only hole with 0.23. There's a mirroring hole here. What I can do is double click on the hole to edit the feature. Instead of having one sketch for the hole, I'll select the other point, and now I have two, and they'll share the same qualifications. Coming back, I see we also have 0.177 appears 4 times. We'll select this hole, go to the hole tool, and we'll change this to 0.177. we'll select each occurrence of that number. We see they offset by diagonals in mirroring positions. And I'll confirm. Next we have 0.191 and 0.191. Again, selecting the hole tool and the points, we can change these to 0.191 and confirm. Turning around the figure, I should see that none of these pass through. Now we have our offset one. This one should be 0.2. So I'll select the hole tool and the point, and we're going to change this to 0.2. If you noticed, I can select the point and then the tool, or the tool and then the point. I'm going to rotate my figure, because now we've completed the front of the figure, but we need to complete the back. To complete the back, what I'll need to do is locate each one of these positions. Once rotating, I'm going to go back to a full back view, and I'm going to create a sketch on the back of the figure. What we'll see is these should line up with some of our parts. The offset is here, which we see our offset point. We also see our diagonals, which will be mirrored in the other direction. The first thing I want to do is project this circle. To project, I go up to the cube. It tells me that I use this to project. When I do this, it applies what I see on the other side of the figure to the current sketch. I'll select this point. Going back, I see that I also want these that are in alignment with its orientation. And I'll select here as well. So I've added all of these points. Now this will be a traditional hole, but these will be a bit different. These will actually be hexagons. I need to choose a tool to center on these. I'm going to go up to the polygon tool, and I'm going to click on this. Again, I'm not concerned with the size yet. I'm going to dimension that. Now I've clicked once, but if I move the mouse, you'll see it add sides. That's not what I want to do. So I'm going to hit escape. Let's use that tool again and do it correctly. I'm going to click and draw out, and it gives me a hexagon. And I'll click once. It tells me there are 6 sides. I don't want to add more or remove them. I'll just simply click again. I'll do the same here. Click and quickly click again. Make sure I don't add sides. If you accidentally add them, delete the figure and start again. Each one of these will be a hexagon. Now my hexagons are in different shapes and sizes. So what I'll need to do is dimension them to make sure they're the correct shape. Here it says the hexagon should be 0.422 from point to point. I can dimension that. I can do 0.422 here on one figure. Now we can do this dimension on each one of the hexagons, or we can use another constraint. Going up to my constraint, I see that I can make things equal. I'll select the constraint for equal, and then the inscribed circle on the shape. I'll apply it to this inscribed circle. Now that I know this one is correct, I'll apply the constraint to the here and here, and then repeat one more time. Now all of the hexagons are the same size. I'll confirm the sketch. I'm going to go to an isometric view, but this time exposing the back side as the front. I'm going to use my extrusion tool. I'm going to select each of the hexagons. Again, the hexagon is extruding in an additive method. I'm going to change this to 0.24. I'm also going to change it to a subtractive method. And I'll confirm. The last thing we need to do is to select this point and create the hole. We're going to create a counterbore. A counterbore means a portion of the hole will be larger than the rest. We'll keep the diameter of the original hole at 0.2. This is what we saw on the other side. The 0.375 is the diameter of the hole on this side. 0.24 is how far the counterbore will sink down. So it won't go all the way through, it should only go halfway through the figure. And finally, in this scenario, the 1 inch is important. It tells us how far it should actually go into the figure. In this case, it'll pass all the way through. We'll click the green check and confirm. We've now completed the trammel base.